High Voltage is back in Marvel Snap, offering the first Ghost Rider as a reward for getting to 12,000 volts. Let's talk about the best decks in the game mode, and also the best decks to actually finish your quests, because that's what's actually going to unlock you the first Ghost Rider the easiest possible way. I think the best place to start in High Voltage is this deck. If you don't have a lot of specific quest stuff pushing you to go a different direction, this deck has felt like the most consistent good stuff deck in the game mode to me. And a lot of that is down to just how powerful and unique and strong all of the stuff that this deck is able to do is. There's a lot of power in a very small package here. Now, this is a sort of small ball deck relative to the game mode. There are a lot of people doing crazy Wong stuff and going infinite and stuff like that, and your job is to just use your disruption so that they cannot do that. And that's really the name of the game when it comes to playing this deck. The other reason I'm starting with this deck is because it contains basically every single one of the big offenders of this format, cards you'll see throughout a bunch of different decks. That's actually basically the premise of what this deck is trying to do, is just play all the cards that are really messed up in High Voltage. You have Ebony Maw, you have Baron Zemo, you have Negasonic, you have Juggernaut, you have all of these cards that are just you're going to see them everywhere. They're going to be in 50 different decks. They're all in this one, and you're going to have Enchantress, you're going to have Shang-Chi, just a ton of ability to do a bunch of stupid stuff, and that's kind of what this format is about. But more importantly, you have a ton of ability to stop your opponent from doing stupid stuff. This is the classic starting point mid-range deck of a format like this, and I think it's a very good option if you always want to feel like you're in control of your games. When you're playing High Voltage, you have to focus not just on the best decks for you to win, but on the best decks for you to win while finishing your quests. I found this one to be very powerful when it came to a deck that needed to win while playing 6-cost cards. One of the cool things that this deck gets to leverage is the combination of wave and 6 costs. So if you have wave on turn 1 and there's enough energy, basically if you get 4 or 5 energy on turn 1, which is eminently possible, it's a 50-50, then basically most waves will give you 2 6-drops on 2. That makes this deck very good at playing 6-drops out of the hand. It can multiply the effectiveness of those 6-drops with Arnim Zola, being able to do stuff like Turn 2, Magneto Zola off of a wave is a very reasonable thing. It gets your Scar very cheap. That's a 3/12. You're going to be able to do a bunch of crazier stuff later in the game. That is the ethos here. So this is not just a deck that is doing a lot of strong stuff. It's doing a lot of strong stuff while also completing your play 6-cost cards quest. And it's also pretty good for your win lanes with 20 or more quests, although I think a lot of decks are going to fall into that category of being genuinely good in that context. Another deck that is excellent when it comes to the power-gated ones is, of course, HV Ongoing. Now, there are a couple of different builds of this. You can opt to go for a bigger number on these by putting an Onslaught in the deck. This is a little mid-rangier. I understand that there are some sacrifices in terms of overall power output, but I find it to be generally less clunky. However, if you're really targeting I gotta get 40 points of power in a lane, you can be an Onslaught gamer in here as well. Being able to multiply things like Mr. Fantastic or Moonstone does really crazy stuff when it comes to Onslaught. Of course, the real stars here are, as always, Iron Man and Mystique. Those are the things that are going to enable you to go over the top of people, and they will do that very, very powerfully. As always, doubling is very powerful, and when Mystique is under a Moonstone, I mean, you're doubling your doubles. That's a very, very powerful thing to do. So there's a lot that this deck is able to do. We can use our Sarah for discounts. We have Ravonna for discounts. You're playing a ton of stuff basically every game. It has multiples on its power thanks to the Iron Man and Mystique, and pretty much you should understand what this deck is doing because it's actually not that far off from the deck that people play on live. Sometimes you'll have a quest that requires you to play 5 cost cards. For a quest like that, this is the best list that I have found. I really enjoyed that this deck was able to do a lot of surprising stuff. One of the cards that I came away just loving the more I played the game mode was Arnim Zola. He just sort of consistently let me do some really dumb stuff, and that was always very fun for me. Just a very interesting sort of way to redirect your power, but this deck has a large amount of 5s. You're discounting them even further thanks to your Sarah, but you can do effectively against like mid-rangey decks. A surprise Panther Zola in an off lane is a very powerful thing to do. Like, that is just really slick, kind of like final turn after a Sarah, you got a bunch of energy, Panther Zola 2020. If you're playing against like that 6 cost deck we talked about, like that is going to be a really reasonable amount of power in that context. Now, there are going to be some decks that go over the top of all of this stuff. Like, that is why you have a Shang-Chi, that is why you have a Juggernaut, that is why you have a Negasonic. This is sort of like big mid-range in the context of the format, where it's like we're still playing stuff that interacts with our opponents, but we also have like what I would describe as like a soft combo kill with the Zola stuff. It's not a hard lock by any means. It is not the kind of thing that you can always count on in every matchup, but against a lot of decks, it is actually going to be very good. The quest that stymied me the most in High Voltage was a win all 3 quest. I think this is the list that I was, well, not I think. This is the list that I was able to accomplish it with. I'm not 100% sure that it holds up in the long term. I literally just yoinked this one off of Untapped. I looked for a Nimrod deck because it seemed like a good way to try to win all 3 locations, but I do feel like probably including Shuri would be a good bet here. This is also, again though, it's like a Nimrod deck that's also a little bit mid-rangey, that's also got some weird Wong stuff. You got Panther Zola, you got like your stupid stuff, right? Like, this is a deck that I think is good for winning all 3 locations because there's worlds in which you have like Panther, we have like Wong, Panther, Zola, and then like a null or something like that. Like, it's not the most likely thing, but if you get a ton of energy, it's absolutely something you can do. And so like you have these games where it's like, oh, okay, I need to win all 3 locations. That's actually very difficult. Another thing you could try is Living Tribunal, but I do want to point out here that one thing that I would encourage everyone watching to do is not retreat, because you never know when your opponent might have one of these quests. And I gotta tell you, this was by far the hardest one to complete. It was an absolute pain. And I think that if I can even have a percentage chance of giving my opponent completed versions of this quest, I will take that every single time, put some good out into the world for once. Back to good stuff piles, I have a fairly complex relationship with Wiccan in High Voltage. Obviously, there's like some really cool incentives where it's like, oh, I got 4 on the first turn, there's a Wiccan, now I have even more energy. But the way you do deck building in this format, like, it just feels like this deck is running like, it's not capitalizing on all the energy that it could be, that it is generating a lot of the time. And the other thing that I noticed when playing this deck is Gore is a lot worse than I think people think that he is, and in this specific situation, I would strongly consider replacing him with another 6-drop. There are a lot of ongoing decks out there, a lot of decks that are just playing big guys, and those are actually, like, Gore was not that large. There's not a ton of decks that are playing like the first deck we talked about. There's just like a bunch of on reveals, and they're all kind of small. That's where Gore shines. But there's really not a lot of those. It feels like people are really going super duper tall this time. And so if you're not stopping them, Gore is usually not going to be worth that 6 energy. After losing to Patriot, I ended up going and playing some Patriot of my own, but really I just wanted to play the card Ultron. Like, that's really the impetus here, was just like, Ultron seems like a really fun thing to be doing. This is hardly a fully invested Patriot Ultron deck. It's actually basically just a Zoo deck, and as a Zoo deck, I can totally understand if you want to say, like, I'm going to cut Patriot, I'm going to cut Ultron, I'm going to get Squirrel Girl back in there, I'm going to build towards being a Gilgamesh Shauna deck. That makes perfect sense to me. You can basically play the normal Zoo deck in High Voltage and just have it be fine, but I don't think there's any novelty in covering something like that, and I do think that this deck taught me something very interesting, which is that, like, there are a surprising amount of games where Ultron is actively good, and a lot of that is because against decks like the good stuff deck, like the Wiccan deck, there are people who are relying on Juggernaut pretty, like, heavily. And so you have this weird duality of a format where half the people you play against are doing something extremely stupid that puts like 40 points in every lane, and the other half are playing very disruptive 3-drops and 4-drops, basically, and this is a deck that is like half good against one and half good against the other. Like, you have your Cosmo for the people who are doing like stupid Wong stuff or whatever, and that's it. And then you have like your Ultron for people who are doing like the mid-rangey Juggernaut Baron Zemo type stuff, and that's it. And so it's like a very odd general metagame. Like, that's the real thing that I really noticed when I was playing this deck, is like half of everyone is just trying to go over the top, and the other half are people who are playing really low to the ground, at least relative to this format, in order to disrupt them. I guess it's time to talk about not necessarily the villain of the format, but probably the deck you may see the most. And Wong is in a really weird position here, because one of the things that I really hope you noticed throughout every deck we talked about is like every single deck anyone is playing has some way to disrupt your Wong. Whether that be Juggernaut or Cosmo or Magneto or whatever. Like, there's something in there that's gonna do it. Red Guardian. There's just a bunch of stuff. And I think that, like, ultimately, if there is a weakness to Wong, it is the face-upness of it. However, since High Voltage doesn't actually punish you for losing, I don't really see a lot of downside to just playing this game and just, like, you know, AFK Wonging people, basically. Just, I'm going to queue up High Voltage, I'm going to play Wong, and if they have it, I lose. If they don't have it, I win. And I think that's like a pretty fun dynamic for a lot of people to actually be able to engage in, because it's not something that you can engage in actual Marvel Snap, the way that the cubes double on turn 6 really punishes you for playing Do They Have It, which I think is a fun part of card games, honestly, that people like feeling rewarded for taking risks, and Marvel Snap sort of pushes you to be risk averse when it comes to the retreat system. And so I think that this is going to scratch an itch for a lot of people watching this video because of that dynamic. Like, just being able to not get punished for losses, just go do some stuff. I'm going to go do something stupid this game. Do you have the answer? If you don't have the answer, you're probably going to lose. I also saw some versions of this that were playing things like Symbiote Spider-Man to go even stupider with a Black Panther. I lost to someone who had a Sinister London that was Symbiote Spider-Man, Black Panther, Arnim Zola, which is one of the funniest things that's ever happened. They're just Panthers flying everywhere, getting increasingly large. Note, of course, I did not retreat despite the fact that I was 100% dead, because what if they needed those 3 location wins? It's important. It's important. You got to keep that in mind. That is sort of generally my understanding of the metagame in High Voltage right now. So I am taking a different tack with this event. Like, I am never really sure how to make content around High Voltage. I'm like the ladder guy, right? Oh, I'm ranked 20 in the world. Come play my decks to like rank up higher. Like, that is not necessarily what is appealing about High Voltage. So when I made this video, I made the conscious decision to focus on, again, like, this is sort of my way of doing decks for High Voltage, which is to say, I want you to understand the metagame, I want you to understand what you'll be playing against, and I want you to have a lot of good options for doing your quests, right? That's actually the goal of this video, is to arm you with the best options, the best decks for when you get one of those quests and you're just like, oh my god, what am I even supposed to do about this? What is my 6-drop deck? You should know that from this video. What is my 5-drop deck? You should know that from this video. That's my way of trying to do what I normally do on ladder, which is like, you know, I'm going to help you climb. This is how I can help you climb in this context. So let me know if you appreciated it, if you thought this was like a worthwhile endeavor for me. I feel like it's a pretty big risk, personally, doing a High Voltage video. Like, it's just, it feels odd to me, but I played a ton of the game mode and I played these decks. And so this is going to be hopefully something that I was able to like put my own twist on just enough that it was able to be helpful to you in a way that maybe is similar, like adapted to High Voltage, that my other videos are to ladder. So thank you so much for watching. As always, I have been KMBest. You have been phenomenal. I will see you in the next one. Good luck getting the first Ghost Rider. As always, thank you so much.